You're good to
Perfect.
go
And
whenever.
who am I speaking to? Who are you?
I am Carrie. I've been the one emailing.
Okay, perfect. Said Gordon, but I was like, you don't look like a Gordon. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, thanks for hosting me, everyone. I can't see everybody that I'm speaking to, but yeah, thanks for attending. My name's Stefan Miller. As Carrie said, I'm the Fisheries and Commercial Manager for the MSC team of Canada East. I help all of our fisheries clients maintain their certification from all the fisheries from Quebec to Newfoundland, some of which you guys would probably be familiar with, and then also support on some of the commercial sides as well. I've got quite a few slides here. I think we have, what, 45 minutes, right, Carrie?
Yes. Yeah, you're good with that.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. And if you guys have any questions along the way, just please interrupt me. It's pretty informal. So I'll just kind of get to it and kind of explain what the MSC is all about. I'll talk about our fishery standard in a decent amount of detail, talk a little bit about our commercial side of things, and then I'll kind of explore some other topics as well. And at the very end, if there's about 5 minutes left, I'm still kind of yapping away, just let me know, because I do want to let everyone know about some opportunities for other kind of like info sessions and training available that are coming up. But yeah, without further ado, I will start. So I'll just talk about the vision. So as Carrie said, the MSC stands for the Marine Stewardship Council. It's an international nonprofit organization to recognize the efforts, to reward the efforts to protect the oceans and safeguard seafood supplies for the future. And we're the world's leading eco certification for wild capture seafood. So any fish or seafood that is actively fished from the ocean. There's a separate certification that's kind of our sister company called the ASC that does the aquaculture stuff. Yeah, kind of continue on there. I'll just tell you a bit about the MSC. So our mission is to use our eco label, which is this the little blue fish at the top right corner. You might have seen that on some seafood that you buy at the grocery store. But it's to use our eco label and fishery certification program to contribute to the health of the world's oceans by recognizing and rewarding sustainable fishing practices, influencing the choices of people make when they buy seafood. When they recognize that logo, we want them to trust that their seafood is coming from a sustainable source, and then working with our partners to transform the seafood market to a sustainable basis. So Carrie, in the little description that I sent her, talked about the kind of like the market driven sustainable certification that we have, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But we work from the start of the supply chain, from the harvesters all the way down to the retailers, and who sell the products to the consumers as well. And our vision, kind of for a global organization, is of the world's oceans to be teeming with life and seafood supplies safeguarded for future generations. And then just a little piece there. So as most of you probably know, healthy oceans are vital to life on Earth. Supplies half the oxygen we breathe, helps regulate climate, produces healthy, nutritious, low carbon protein for a growing planet. Our goal is it's an ambitious goal, but it is to end overfishing. And we want to make climates more resilient, or sorry, fisheries more resilient to climate change as well, in our oceans as well. And we've done some analysis as well. So, for example, if all fisheries use sustainable practices to the MSC standard, it's been calculated that approximately 16 million more tons of seafood could be produced sustainably, and that would meet the protein needs of an extra 72 million people per year, which is quite significant. And not to mention all the jobs that could be sustained and created from that as well. And here's just a little history of the MSC. So it's pretty interesting, actually. Those of you that are from Newfoundland, or just you guys probably know about the cod collapse. I'm also a MUN alumni, just by the way, as well. So when we talk about the collapse of the Grand Banks cod, I'm pretty sure it's intertwined with every course you've ever taken, whether that's math, history, social sciences, obviously biology as well. And then for you that are working in the fishery sector, you probably hear about it quite a bit. But the actual program, came from a collaboration between a company called Unilever, which is one of those like mega corporations that's kind of got their fingers in everything, and then WWF, the World Wildlife Fund. And they came together in 1992 to create this program, to create a market-based incentive for fisheries to follow a global best practice standard. And you can kind of see that. I won't go through every single thing, but throughout the years, you can see some of the improvements, some of the first fisheries that were certified, different milestones that we have all the way up to 2024, where we now have 716 fisheries engaged in the MSC program across 63 countries. That number is fluctuating, but always trending up. And our goal is eventually to have 1/3 of all global fisheries engaged in the program. Right now, we're just a hair under 20%. So ambitious goals, still have quite a ways to go in the next 5 years there. And as I mentioned before as well, we do have a sister organization called the ASC. So we kind of just talk about our comparable goals, but the shared goal is to help protect the environments, particularly ocean, lakes, and rivers. Excuse me. Supporting workers and communities, ensuring that our seafood supplies is available for future generations as well. So if you ever see the green logo, that's just associated with aquaculture seafood. The aquaculture sector and products tend to have a few other competing certifications. So you can kind of look online to see how those compare. But when you see the blue fish logo, like you see on the left corner with the MSC, who I work for, that's for wild capture seafood only. So just the wild capture seafood that is actively fished. And just talk about our strategic plan really quick. So I talked about our vision, I talked about our 2030 goal, and here are some of the pillars underneath here. So we're always looking to reward in the fisheries that are engaging in our program. And as most of you probably know, is that sustainability isn't just this like sticker that you put on your seafood. It's not something you just say that you're doing, or you can give yourself an award. Like I always compare, like we talk about greenwashing and stuff like that. I always compare it to those car commercials where you see like, oh, like the Ford F-150 winner of the Stevenson Award is probably an award that they just made up themselves and that they're slapping on to make the car look better. But at the end of the day, the MSC, these fisheries and these stakeholders, partners that we work with, they really put their money where their mouth is, and they're investing and they're committed to sustainability. Sustainability is a commitment at the end of the day, and it takes investment. Like some of these partners are putting in hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars into research to safeguard the resource that many depend on, or that are important to their provincial or national GDP. And they're working with governments. There are a lot of fisheries, as you guys probably have a better idea as well. Like most people don't know this, but like fisheries companies are big investors and are leading in research in a lot of ways for fisheries and ecosystem science. And fisheries management. It's not just the DFO, it's not just academia, it's very much also industry that's pushing the envelope there. So we want to recognize them and giving them like a market advantage and access to certain markets by carrying the blue fish logo, the blue MSC eco label, and I'll talk a bit about how they get access to different markets there as well. And for example, I just pulled this off the internet, but you might see like Cloverleaf's a company that's pretty prominent on the East Coast, and you'll often see like cans of tuna is really popular in Canada for certified seafood, but you'll also see other types of frozen seafood, or even at like a Loblaws, or I guess Dominion for you guys. You'll see at the fresh fish counter sometimes you'll see some eco-labeled products. You'll see it at Costco, Sobeys as well, though. So that's what the logo looks like. And you might be asking, okay, like what does this bluefish logo mean? So it means that it's certified sustainable under our standard. And like I said, we have the global kind of, we're the leading standard for sustainability practices. And I'll go into the details of what that means, how fisheries are assessed, and what kind of like rigor goes behind that as well. It also means that they're verified. So the other part of our certification is the supply chain certification called the Chain of Custody Standard, or COC. And so once the fish is caught and lands at the wharf, the whole supply chain all the way to the end product where they can use the sticker, the logo, is audited and needs to report and needs to be certified and verified every single year. So if there's ever anything wrong, or like a non-conformity or something that goes wrong with the logo, the logoed product, we can go back to the supply chain and kind of figure out where it went wrong, or where there's a swap with a non-certified product. So it's quite serious, and it affects where it kind of impacts a lot of change throughout the supply chain as well. And then you can also be sure that it's wild caught as well. We're not swapping out any farm seafood. Not that farm seafood is necessarily bad, but we're very focused on wild caught only with the MSC Blue logo. So I'll just talk about some of the numbers. Just kind of give you guys a few statistics to understand kind of the reach that we're at as well. So I talked about our global impacts as well. So like I said, we have 716 fisheries engaged in the MSC program. So that doesn't necessarily mean, so when I say engaged, they're not all certified necessarily. And I'll get to that in the next slide. Engaged can mean either like in assessment. So there's some fisheries that are like on their way to being certified, because it often takes about a year and a half, 2 years once they're kind of committed to doing it. But sometimes we're engaged with fisheries for 10 years before they even get to that point. So it's a long process. But one of the beautiful things that I think the MSC is very good at is we're very data driven, and we record everything, and we're extremely transparent. Pretty much all the reports that any fishery would publish, or any information that they're used to inform their certification, their assessments, is all publicly available. And I'll show you where you can find that information later in the presentation. But here we have, and this numbers is always growing, is 2,362 measurable improvements made by MSC certified fisheries. So that's something other eco labels and certifications don't necessarily do, is we have a track record, and we're always tracking the improvements that we're making. And again, back to sustainability, we talk about, okay, what does it mean? It's a commitment. So we're measuring, you have to measure those data points, and it's all about incremental improvements. It's not just like, okay, we're just gonna stop fishing because this fishing method, let's say like trawling or bottom trawling, has impacts. We're just gonna stop fishing. That's not really what we do. We're not prescriptive. We don't think any one, other than like throwing dynamite or like a bomb in the ocean or something like that. We don't kind of what's the word, discriminate against any type of fishing, because if we look at trawling, for example, there's just millions of tons of seafood that are fished using trawling. So instead of just outlawing it completely, let's work with the people harvesting, because they want to ensure that their livelihood is sustained as well, and create a framework that they can follow to recognize that the trawlers that are doing a good job will be recognized using the Bluefish logo there as well. And so, like I said, talking about engagement, so that 19.3 engaged means that 16.5% of those global fisheries are certified, 1.5 are in assessment, so on their way, and then 1.3 are certified but suspended. So what does that mean? That means that a certified fishery can kind of fail to meet certain criteria, and I'll get into the meat and potatoes of that a little bit later. But we hold them accountable, right? I said it's a commitment. So and it's not always their fault. Like sometimes there's climate change issues, there's management, kind of like regional management authority issues as well. So sometimes they can fall out of certification. So we want there to be an incentive to kind of keep going and to maintain that progress. And there's certain levels that need to be maintained or achieved over the time of their certification, so they can fall out. And when they do fall out, if they're suspended from their certificate, their products can no longer hold the Bluefish logo. So that's part of the incentive there. But I'll dive into the details of that a bit more as well. And of those improvements I discussed earlier as well. So there's different categories of improvements. Here we can talk about endangered species, stock status, fisheries management, ecosystems, and habitats. So those are some of the improvements that have been made over the last 3 years, so 417. So that's a significant improvement of the 2,362 that we've had. And then we can talk about the growth in MSC certified catch as well, all the way from 1999 all the way to about last year. So we're a growing program. There's different kind of spurts and kind of peaks and valleys there, but we're always trying to up the trend as well. You can kind of see the growth over time, and then in assessments that eventually trickles into the light blue line will trickle into the dark blue line as well. And then we can talk about the different kind of like levels of certification here. Here's a map that kind of shows you the level of engagement on each kind of corner of the ocean there. So it's, yeah, you can kind of see the areas that are the most engaged, we are in assessment. We also have a in transition to MSC program that's now called the MSC Improvement Program that allows fisheries that are not quite reaching the mark of the minimum mark of our standard, and we give them resources to help. It's basically like a commitment program for them to transition into our full certification program over 5 years. So we just released that, and we're just engaging with retailers to recognize that program as well. And I kind of talked about this progress, so I'll skip through here. So at a glance, this is kind of how our fishery works. So it's like we recognize and reward sustainable fishing. So it all starts with the fishery. So that's one, the first two circles are one component of our program. One's not necessarily more important, but there's a lot more kind of rigor, I would say, and kind of investment on the fishery side of things, because it just takes a long time to get people engaged, get them on board with the program, get on board with like the cost of the program and how that's shared. Does a fisheries association or group want to work together with another group? All right, so like for example, in Newfoundland, there's a few fisheries. There's the Newfoundland crab fishery that certifies all I think it's all Newfoundland crab is MSC certified, whether you knew that or not. We also have the Ocean Choice International. That's a vertically integrated company in Newfoundland. They have a yellowtail flounder fishery that's certified as well. We have great engagement in Newfoundland, yeah, that's a fishery where you might think like, oh my, tons of different harvesters all around the island, but at the end of the day, they all work together, and all their associations have come together to kind of put the money forward, put the investment, and put the change forward to gain the certification, so that product can be globally recognized as certified sustainable. And then that product can enter, once that product is certified, the fishery is certified, it can enter the chain of custody, and then all the actors along that supply chain need to be certified to then sell that product as labeled under a licensing agreement, which is the fourth circle there. And then at the end can go to the consumer product as well. The chain is definitely a lot more complicated, but at a glance, that's kind of how it works. And then this is a little bit deeper. Sorry. There's, like I said, there's the fishery standard and then the chain of custody standard there to the right. So the three main pillars of the fishery standard, the three main principles are healthy fish stocks, ecosystem impacts, and effective management. And then on the chain of custody side, I'll kind of come back to that later. So I'll do a bit of a dive into the fisheries side of things, but this is kind of how our approach works here. So just go here. So how it works, the fishery standard on number 1 there, at the top of the circle, the fisheries that meet the MSC standard are independently certified as sustainable. And then number 2, retailers and restaurants choose MSC certified sustainable seafood to sell as well. And then a certified supply chain assures the consumers that only seafood from the MSC certified fishery is sold with the blue logo. Number 4, consumers preferentially purchase seafood with the MSC blue label, and then market demand for certified seafood increases as well. And that's a big part of my job as well, is to engage. I'm more on the fishery side, but I also work with retailers like the Dominions, like the Sobeys, Walmarts, Costco's, and this is an international. If I wasn't clear already, this is an international organization as well. So we have teams on I think every continent except for Antarctica and the Arctic, working in different countries or different country groups to help work with retailers to recognize and to commit to buying sustainable seafood. There's different levels of commitment as well. Some retailers have it in their kind of sustainability guide or kind of purchasing mandate that they will only, when available, they will only purchase MSC certified seafood or ASC or for aquacultured seafood, just because the availability of seafood isn't always available in wild form. So sometimes, like for salmon, for example, they'll often, for Atlantic salmon, they'll buy farmed. But some companies are really kind of set, like MSC only, that's the highest standard. We only want to buy wild capture seafood if it's MSC certified. So that's how we help create change. And then if they are only buying the logoed seafood, then that creates a market that's exclusive to those that are certified as well. So let's just say if I don't know if crab's the best example, but let's just say a Newfoundland snow crab is the only, and it's not the only one. There's a few other ones in Canada, but let's just say the Newfoundland snow crab fishery is the only one that is certified MSC. Then they would have a preference, like other companies would seek out that product because it's the only one that's certified. But for transparency, there's another one in Nova Scotia, and there has been another one in Quebec as well. Or another example is like lobster in the Maritimes. Not yet in Newfoundland, but we're working on it. But that lobster is the only lobster you can buy in the world that is MSC certified. So we have, retailers all over the world, like in China, Europe, the US. Like the US lobster fishery is not MSC certified for different reasons. So yeah, it gives them that market access, and then it's kind of like a pro business way of ensuring sustainability instead of just saying like, hey, like you need to do better. We're trying to like promote and give them like reward them for their efforts as well. And then just number 5 there is more fisheries end up choosing to improve their practices and volunteer to be assessed to the MSC standard. And if I didn't mention it before, the MSC standard is completely voluntary, so we're not out there like selling the program necessarily to people, and it's always their choice. And if they're certified, they can always decide to drop out. It's always up to them. Most don't. I think like 99% of them decide to stay, or if they get suspended, they try to get back in because they see the value of the program. And then that makes the changes on the water, number 6, and then the cycle continues. So I'll just go on to the landscape of assessment there. Roles and responsibilities. So how our program works is the MSC is kind of the support system to the right there. So we write the standard, and we kind of create the rules of the game for the certification, but we don't actually certify any fisheries. That would be, it's all third-party assessed and audited. So the third-party auditors are called conformity assessment bodies, or what like we call them the CABs. So every year they will do, well, like if a fishery wants to be certified, they'll do a full assessment. And then once that's done, that their certificate lasts for 5 years before they need to recertify. And then, but every year of that certification, they get audited from that conformity assessment body. So it's pretty rigorous. Every single year, you're being tracked on progress, improvements that you might need to make. Some fisheries are really good, and it's kind of just either they're already super sustainable and they kind of just fit the standard, or other ones need kind of action plans to improve over time. We're always tracking that. We're always looking for improvement. But then part of that process as well includes feedback from NGOs and peer reviewers and academics. So during that assessment process, anybody can actually submit feedback. It's an open forum. All the information is publicly available. If there's a particular like issue that hits, you can submit information and kind of create a case for why a fishery is scored like too high or too low. Usually it's NGOs or academics that are kind of like for or against a particular component of that fishery. And then there's I'll kind of get into the specifics here. So within a certification, there's it's not, so if like for the Newfoundland crab fishery, for example, I'll probably keep coming to that example because it's probably more familiar to you guys. But there's different units of certification within that. So let's say one fishery is in a certain crab fish, or one unit of certification is either a collection or an individual crab fishing area. So if you look at like the DFO fisheries management maps, you'll see what's called a CFA for crab fishing area. So either a group of them or an individual one will be designated as a unit of certification. And then that's important too, because let's just say one crab fishing area, whatever they're doing, maybe their practices, their fisheries management, their impact on the environment are really just detrimental over the course of a certification. That group that is the fishery that is certified, they can actually just drop that one if it's scoring very poorly, and then that one can kind of individually look to kind of come back, or they can kind of do their own thing. It's up to them. And all these groups are organized in a bunch of different ways. Not everyone is the same. Sometimes it's the processors or the packer. Like there's all these different groups that kind of put the money and the investment or the organization of this whole certification together. And then even as part of that as well, the whole unit of assessment. So let's just say only half of the crab fishing areas are looking to get certified. The the assessment will still take into account the entire unit of assessment, which is the crab fishery, into account. So even if one half of it is being really sustainable, it's still looking at like kind of the more global perspective. So we're not being kind of closed-minded and saying like, well, we're sustainable over here, but this part of the fishery is doing really bad. Like it still has to kind of meet a certain mark as well. And then, yeah, there might be like other, oops, sorry about that, other eligible fishers, and might be kind of like what I was talking about earlier. Other eligible fishers may exist, but might not want to participate, but they're still kind of assessed globally. And then the assessment of the unit of assessment must include the impacts of the other eligible fishers, like I said as well. So this is a cool diagram that kind of explains how this works. So you can see the vessels in gray. Well, you can see the circle that's kind of highlighted there. That is the unit of assessment. So that's everything that's being taken into account into a fisheries assessment for the certification process. And then you can see the vessels with the MSC logo, the black vessels, the blue logo. Those are the units of certification. So those are the vessels, the fisheries in question that want to be certified. And you can see the vessels in gray. They're not looking to be certified, but they're still taken into account during the calculations and the overall performance of the fishery. And then you can see the fish in orange are the target stock. So if you're fishing crab, that is the target stock. But then the fish in green might be like other, what we call ETP, endangered, threatened, and protected species. And then there's also out of scope species. So it's really a very holistic and ecosystem based review and assessment that's being done. It's not just, okay, are we fishing correctly? Yes or no, pass. There's a lot of different criteria involved. And then we also look at the ecosystem impacts too, as well. So that kind of gives you like a perspective of what's being taken into account. And this is just another kind of diagram that explains it here. For a northern shrimp example, they look at the method. Okay, that's otter trawl. The vessels are shrimp boats licensed to fish in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The location is the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The unit of certification is the same as the unit of assessment minus any other eligible fishers that are not initially certified but may want to join. So this just gives you another perspective as well. It can be a little confusing, so if you don't understand it right away, that's all good. It took me a while to kind of figure it all out when I started the job as well, but it just basically illustrates how the certification process works. And then we talk about client groups as well. So a client group may include fishers or fisheries associations, but also processors or other types of companies that are not necessarily part of the fisheries assessment, but the client confirms that they're able to access the certificate, because sometimes there's certain processors or like a lot of these companies or kind of fisheries associations include the processors and the harvesters as well. So sometimes there's really weird examples. Sometimes it gets kind of weird. Sometimes, like for example, there's a shrimp fishery in Canada where all the boats are technically MSC certified, but it's only MSC certified if you buy the product from a certain client group of processors, because they are the ones that put the money forward to invest in the certification. So that we want to make sure that like the way their group is organized is they want to maintain the advantage to them, to those that are contributing either monthly or yearly to that certification, and they're maintaining the funds to either make the improvements that are necessary, invest in research, run projects, get new gear, etc. So it's kind of a weird one where it's, yeah, technically all the boats and all the shrimp coming in is certified sustainable, but you can only label it in that MSC certified if it goes through that particular group of processors, for example. And sometimes they'll create two groups if they're eventually competing against each other, but then eventually they'll often come together and just make one big group and just share the costs. I think that's the best way, and I think the MSC does a good job of that, as well as just bringing people together and working together to create that market advantage and to access those markets as well. So I'll go into the kind of the nerdy stuff here with the MSC standard there. So like I said, I talked 3 principles earlier there. And this is kind of another diagram kind of showing how it works. So there's the principle 1, which is the sustainability of the stock, which is in orange there. There's the ecosystem impacts that go from the habitat, other species, and even seabirds as well above water. And then the P3 is the effective management, so what's happening outside of the water. It's the more human component of it as well. And this just kind of shows and illustrates how things work. So there's 28 indicators within the 3 principles, and then there's actually 74, what are they called? I'll get to that. I can't remember the name of them. I'll just flow through this part because you guys understand. So these are the performance indicators within the principles as well. So each principle kind of has a subcategory, and then within those subcategories, there's more subcategories called performance indicators. I won't go into this in too much detail. It gets pretty nitty gritty, but it kind of gives you an idea of like what's being assessed and whatnot. And then, scoring issues, that was the word I was looking for. So within those performance indicators, there's usually 2 or 3 or 4 scoring issues as well. And this talks about the actual scoring as well. So to be the minimum standard in terms of scoring for fishery is that all of these scoring issues need to, our performance indicators need to score at least a 60. So if you have anything below a 60, you're automatically not eligible to be MSC certified. And then the global average of all the performance indicators needs to be 80. And if you have a score that's below 60, then you'll be assigned a condition on that particular indicator that you need to improve upon at a certain point, either at the end of your certification or at a certain milestone year during that certification as well. So that holds the fisheries accountable. So there's a bit of a minimum barrier of entry, but then you have to meet the minimum or the minimum improvements over time with that 5 years. And if you don't have like that average of 80, because all the performance indicators need to be at least at 80 by the end of the certification if you want to recertify. And here we go. This kind of explains it a little bit. So this is kind of the scoring scheme at the end of the 5 years. So you never have to get to 100. Many fisheries have score 100 or close to 100 for certain parts of the assessments, but then are lower, maybe 60, or have a condition on other parts. And then there's some fisheries that do really well that have no conditions. And those fisheries, they have less issues. There's less to kind of support on my side as well. And then there's other ones that have no conditions for a little bit, and then an issue arises, and then they have new conditions based on just like new issues that arise. That could be environmental impacts, that could be changes in fisheries management. We also update our standard every kind of 10 to 15 years. So as that standard changes and updates, there's new kind of performance expectations and requirements. So during that transition, like most fisheries will have some conditions that they need to address or that are assigned to them during that time of transition as well. There we go. And this is a bit of the life cycle of the certification for a fishery. So there's the pre-assessment. So that's when they meet with their conformity assessment body, or you can say the auditors. There's a site visit done. They review the available data. They identify stakeholders and the issues or interests. And they basically they kind of like give you an idea of like, okay, like this is how your fishery is performing right now against our standard. These are things you would want to improve on, maybe before entering an assessment or engaging in an assessment. And then the actual assessment part initially takes about 8 to 12 months. Sometimes it can go to even like half a year and a half, 18 months. And then once certified, that certification lasts 5 years, but they have audits every year. Their certificate is publicly issued. The public certification report is released. So if you're ever interested in learning more about a fishery and within the MSC context, I'll show you a site later on that'll actually show you where you can find all that information available. And there's the annual audits, and then they can reassess after that. Go a bit quicker as well. I'm just looking at the time. And part of the funds that we collect, and I'll explain to you like how we collect those funds as well. But we reinvest in the fisheries as well. We have different funds available, like grants for student research, for transition assistance for fisheries that are in their kind of like our improvement programs, science and research funds, and then for fisheries that have done a full year of certification, most of them are eligible for a recertification assistance fund. So we'll actually put up to 30,000. We're based in the UK. That's where our headquarters is. So all of our stuff is in Great British pounds. So they can get up to 30,000 Great British pounds towards their reassessment as well. And here are a couple resources. So yeah, this is the website that you can see called Track a Fishery. If you just type in MSC Track a Fishery, there's a whole directory of all of our in assessment, certified, or suspended fisheries that you can see all the information on. And then here's the page for the Newfoundland crab fishery, for example, and you can see they were certified in 2013, and then their current certificate expires in 2029 because they were certified last year. And yeah, there's just tons of good information. If you just go to the assessments tab, there's so much information. It's like a wealth of information if you want to understand it from like that sustainability side of things. And you can kind of see how it works going through. They're pretty big documents, but it's always a fun read if you're interested in a particular species or fishery. And then I'll quickly talk about our chain of custody program. So we saw this slide earlier, so I'll just focus on the right side. So the chain of custody standard, focuses on 4 main pillars: so identification, segregation, effective management, and only certified product carrying the logo. And then I'll just kind of a reminder of our approach there. We can already talked about that though. And then so the way we work with the supply chain is we often work with retailers that will demand or only source for a certain product, or will ask for a certain product to be MSC certified. So then that demand and that market signal creates change throughout the supply chain. So then say like the processor needs to be certified with their CSC standard, then it goes to the packer, or it goes to the canner, and it goes to, there's all these different steps. Most of you probably know how complex these supply chains can be and how dynamic they can be. So over time, we've grown to have a lot of these different kind of supply chain pieces be certified over time. And these are just some of the benefits that we talk about when we're talking to retailers in terms of like what it means to carry the logo and what the partnership with the MSC means. Yeah, you guys can probably read some of those. And then we talk about the certification difference as well. So it's always about continuous change. Like I said, sustainability is a commitment. So 92% of MSC certified fisheries continue making improvements after certification as well. So that's why it's kind of this process of like, okay, we get them up to our like kind of baseline and minimum standard over the 5 years. They maintain that certification, and then once there's new research, we update our certification or our fishery standard, and then they try to attain that. So it's a bit of a game of, we're not always looking for the state of the art, but we're trying to move as many people as we can into the same direction incrementally over time. And then once we have enough engaged fisheries at a certain level, then we try to like see, okay, what is another improvement we can make without making it impossible or too hard for them to maintain their certification. So we're really looking at that like 80% level for most of it, but we have some fisheries, like I said, that perform very, very well at a world-class level. And then we're also globally recognized. So we, if I have time, I'll talk about it at the end of the presentation, but we hit and we contribute to a lot of the UN SDG goals as well. And then we can look at market growth here. So the value of MSC certified product is upwards of $12 billion. We have labeled product in 66 countries, almost 21,000 different products. And then we have almost 48,000 sites, so parts of the supply chain that hold the COC chain of custody certification. And yeah, world-class standard. I think that slide's a random slide, apologies. And like I said, this is kind of the chain of certification. So I talk about the sourcing. Companies must purchase from an MSC certified source. They have to be able to identify the product as it goes through their operation. It needs to be segregated from non-MSC product. They need to trace and record the volume of MSC product going in, and then the volume of MSC product going out. So if it is processed, how much of it was removed and how much of it is going forward into the supply chain. And then the company's, management and system needs to be kind of addressed and up to the standard of of the standard, and they get audited as well. So the chain of custody certificate lasts 3 years, and every year they are audited as well. So every year they'll have an auditor go into their business and just check things out and see if they have any like non-conformities that are against the standard. And yeah, and this is important too, and part of what we do as well is we're always trying to like keep on top of things, because there's also a lot of like mislabeled seafood as well, where like there's always one. Well, I mean, the example here is this species called bassa that is sometimes sold as cod. So that's another advantage of the certificate, is that when you see the blue fish logo, you know that's exactly what you're getting. So there's some studies that have been done that up to 30% of seafood is mislabeled. So sometimes what you think you're buying isn't always what you're getting at the end of the day. So that's really important. And I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we know groceries are expensive and you want your dollars to count. So especially if you're spending money on something, you want to make sure you're getting what you're paying for. And then I'll just talk about some of the benefits. So I'll run through these pretty quick just so I have time for questions, but I talk about some of the SDG goals that we impact on. So we talk about zero poverty. We contribute to livelihoods and want to give people meaningful opportunities for work. So there's a lot of people that depend on fishing and seafood for their livelihood. Zero hunger, like I said before, if all fisheries are sustainable, there'd be, I think it was like 76 million extra tons of seafood available, and that's low carbon low impact protein as well. Responsible consumption, livelihoods and decent work, reducing carbon emissions. So if we look at the graph here, wild fisheries is one of the lowest, probably some of the healthiest protein available as well. And then partnerships and collaborations. So like we said, we work with a lot of different brands to promote sustainable seafood and promote their brand as well. So we do a lot of storytelling on our marketing and communication side as well. And then just a kind of a bigger kind of zoom out there on the SDGs. And then, yeah, kind of talked about that before as well. So there's a lot of benefits if all fishing was sustainable. Probably not necessarily possible, maybe one day, but we're starting with 1/3 of fisheries being engaged to begin with. And just before I go to questions there, I just wanted to let you guys know if there was any interest of doing a deeper dive than I did today. We have a 3-hour session next week on Thursday, the 20th from 2 to 5. I can send Carrie the link for that. Called capacity building training level 1, and yeah, we just do a much deeper dive. So if you're ever interested in just understanding the kind of the ins and outs and of the fishery standard, this first kind of step training does that. It's free. Like I said, I can send Carrie the link and you guys can attend if you'd like. It's all online, so myself and some American colleagues will be delivering that presentation. And then there's also another one. We don't have a date yet for this training, but if you're ever interested in being an auditor, like I talked about, like the third-party auditors, a really cool job that I don't think enough people like students or kind of like young professionals necessarily know about. A lot of us go into this field to either save the whales or for a very like focused thing, either like saving the turtles. We want to work with coral, but there's only so many jobs, and you can actually make some pretty big impacts on those species or those causes on other ways. And there's a big demand for the auditors. So there's a bunch of different companies that have that do these audits globally, and you'll get paid to travel to different locations to hold these audits. I think it pays quite well as well, and there's just like a wealth of experience to be gained. So if you're thinking about careers, you don't necessarily know what you want to do, this is a good option as well. And you can always contact me at stefan.miller@msc.org if you have any questions about anything. And then you can also follow us on Instagram at MSC Bluefish. If you just want to like learn more about the MSC, we post a lot of recipes and different kind of fish facts and whatnot there. So yeah, that's my presentation. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and happy to field any questions if you guys are interested there.
All right, we have a few minutes for questions if anyone in the room wants one, and then we'll go online. We're just gonna have people come up so you can see them.
For sure. I'm just trying to get back to the view of can't really see anyone here. Oh, there we go. Hey there.
Hi, that was a really cool presentation. I was just wondering, is there any competition with other sustainable seafood labels? Like I know Oceanwise does one. And then my other question is, there's a lot of people I know that have worked as fisheries observers and have like worked out at sea, which kind of sounds sort of similar to like what an auditor would be doing and like making sure they're following protocols. But a lot of times the conditions of work aren't ideal because they're not really received that well. So I'm just wondering, like, would people be received well if they were an auditor?
For sure. So that's a great question. I'll start with the first one. So yeah, you mentioned Oceanwise. So Oceanwise isn't necessarily like a competitor. It's a completely different organization than the MSC. It's definitely a great organization. They have their fingers in a bunch of different kind of initiatives like plastics and ocean cleanups. They do their own independent research. Really great organization. But yeah, you're right. You will see the Oceanwise logo on certain seafood, and sometimes you'll see our logo and Oceanwise on the same seafood. So the way their logo works is it's a recommendation program. So they don't do any internal audits. There's no traceability done on any of the products that they have, unless it also has the MSC logo as well. And it's also free to use. So if you're, like I said, it's a great program to inform people, kind of like based on their research, this is like a product that they would recommend. But that's kind of all it is. You don't know where that product's coming from. You don't know, is it actually sustainable in that moment? Because a company, since their program is free to use, their company can just say like, hey, as long as this product is recommended by Oceanwise, we'll just put the sticker here at no cost, right? So oftentimes we get asked, okay, like what is the benefit of us paying these fees? And I didn't really mention it before, but the way we kind of fund the nonprofit is we have a royalty fee on any product that is using the MSC logo. So it's 0.5% of the value of that product once it's sold is comes back to us and is reported against every year. So then companies have fees that they pay back to us. But like I said, we reinvest that, and also just to have the amount of rigor and kind of compliance and traceability that we have, it costs money. It's just there's no way around it. So there's an inherent value to that as well. So when a consumer sees the MSC logo, you know that's traceable. You know that's from the source that's certified as well, and you know it adheres to this open, this transparent, this traceable, and the three pillars that I talked to you about. Whereas Oceanwise is not, it's not just a recommendation. I'm not trying to bash them or anything like that, but there is some key differences. So when you're looking at both logos, just keep that in mind. It's not to say don't buy Oceanwise. They do a lot of good research on their own, but if you really want to be sure that what you're buying is from a sustainable source, then I'd say like the MSC one is definitely a lot more rigorous. Like I said, it's the world's kind of like best in class, the gold standard for fishing sustainability if you're trying to buy and put your purchasing power towards that. And then second question was with respect to the auditors. So the auditors wouldn't actually be going on the boat, although fisheries observers are part of what goes into the assessment. So it's actually a big issue, like you touched on, where the conditions can be rougher for a fisheries observer. They might not be well received. That's not the actual auditing part. Where we do the auditing is more of like at a bigger scale sometimes, not all the time. We have some kind of like artisanal fisheries around the world, but they wouldn't be going, like they'll go on the boat sometimes, but it's more big picture. So they'd be looking at like a bunch of aggregated data. They'd be looking at, okay, like what is the fishing practices? They'd be working with DFO very closely in the Canadian side. They'd be working with DFO, and they're looking at the fishing practices, and all that information is pretty well recorded. But that component of observation is taken into consideration. So an issue, a big conversation right now that's kind of a hot topic is, especially going into our new standard, the version 3.1, is if there's no observers, how do we collect that information? So that's where technologies like electronic observation systems, or there's some companies on the West Coast that are trying like AI identification systems for catch as well. I think that's probably the direction that whole kind of thing is going, because there's just not enough people to do the job. And then the people that do the job, it becomes expensive because there's only one person. They'll ship a person from Nova Scotia all the way to like northern, you know what I mean? Like it's the human capital part gets complicated, and it's just the conditions of work and then the privacy. So on the harvester side, I can definitely see where being observed would be a little sketchy sometimes, but there's conversations about like, okay, like that data being collected, that is owned by the harvester as well. So obviously it informs assessments like the MSC, but it also is very important information for a DFO. So what is the ethics around that data and that observation as well. So there's still a lot of trials there. It's a bit of a wicked problem to figure out, but it's really interesting. Hope that helps and answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Great questions. Thanks.
And then we have a question online from Actual Gord.
Oh, perfect.
He asks, there's a lot of discussion about sustainability, but how does the MSC define a sustainable ocean?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we'll go back to the 3 pillars I discussed. So there's the health of the stock. There's the impacts to the ecosystem that we focus on, and then there's the actual management. But a sustainable ocean, kind of like bigger picture, I think is a world where people, I think a lot of it is working together. I'm kind of speaking with myself with my MSc background. I won't necessarily like put that under, not like speaking on behalf of the MSc total, because I think everyone has their own kind of definition of that. But I think based on my experience at the MSc and what is a sustainable ocean, I think it really means that there's collaboration, I think, is a huge part of it, because all these issues are like, at the end of the day, they're human issues that we're creating for ourselves, because we are the ones taking from the ocean. We are the ones impacting it with shipping and different extraction processes. There's a million things that come from the ocean. Fish is just one of them. And so I think it's being very conscious and being aware and not taking too much, and also measuring the impacts, I think, is really important. I think that's something that the MSC does very well. If we know how we're impacting the ocean, and we're always assessing, and we're always kind of measuring and reporting, we create this kind of database, which the MSC I think also does well. I'm going to pat ourselves in the back, because we have this very long record of a global standard, which I think is really important too, because this goes beyond language. We're working with like artisanal tuna fisheries in Indonesia. We're working with large tuna fisheries in Australia. We have these super specific swordfish fisheries in Nova Scotia, for example, that use like harpoon, and everyone's using different tools. Everyone's fishing different things. Everyone comes from a different cultural background, but at the end of the day, we're still measuring against the same standards and the same kind of core principles. And we're really focused on these principles. So we talked about Oceanwise before. They do a bunch of other great stuff in terms of education, cleanups. I don't know all their different programs, but they're very wide in their reach and in what they touch on, whereas we're very like specific on what we reach on. So in terms of like our perspective of what a sustainable ocean looks like, we want resources to be there for future generations. We want this like seafood is the last wild source of food when we look at it. Where do your vegetables and fruit come from? There's not a lot of like, unless you're going to the farmer's market or someone's picking blueberries from a bush on the East Coast Trail or something like that. That's a very small portion of your food that's coming from a wild source. So seafood that's being wild caught is kind of the last frontier, because we don't really sell. I mean, you guys in Newfoundland you can sell some hunted moose here and there and whatnot, but there's not a lot of that. You can't just go hunt and sell deer in the grocery store. So the fish is really that kind of the last frontier. So we're really focused on that being sustained over time. And there's actually some research that came out as well. It's not every fishery, but on average, when we look at it like a global perspective, MSC fish certified fisheries, like overall, there's like an increase in biomass compared to fisheries that are non-certified. Like I said, the nuance there is that there's some fisheries that like, for example, we had a fishery in like the Gulf of St. Lawrence that, despite being MSC certified, the impacts of climate change within that Gulf of St. Lawrence ecosystem is just, the impacts of climate change and environmental change, ecosystem change are just too strong despite the efforts. So it's not like a solution that fixes everything, but we still want to remain engaged with those fisheries, and we still want to give them an opportunity and reward their sustainable practices. But at the end of the day, there's some things that you just like, you can't fight global pressures and global emissions that impact the ocean in that way. So I don't know if that answers your question, Gord, bit of a roundabout way of answering there.
Any other questions? We have one more coming up. And that'll be the last question that we have time for.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentation.
No problem.
I had a question on the demand of sustainable seafood. So kind of a two-part question. The first one was, do you know the numbers or much of the change after fisheries gets the MSC certification? Do they see like an increase in their sales? And the second part of the question is, if they do see an increase in their sales, does that ever cause them to begin ramping up the amount that they're fishing and then cause them to ultimately like lose the sustainability check mark?
That's a great question. I don't have the exact numbers. I think it depends, like fishery to fishery, it kind of depends. So if you look at like kind of the basic economics of the whole like supply and demand thing, you'll see some fisheries like Newfoundland crab's a good example. So where that product is going will probably dictate the price. So if it's going somewhere where, because some retailers will actually ask for the MSC, like MSC certified seafood, but they won't ask for it to be logoed for certain reasons, right? So there's always like workarounds where they're like trying to avoid the extra cost, because it's the cost of the seafood only comes, or like a royalty fee only comes back to us if the product is logoed. So if it's not logoed, they can still, which still drives change, like, right, they're demanding only MSC product, but they're not showing the logo. So if they're not showing the logo, it's a bit of a disservice to the consumer because they don't necessarily know what they're buying, but they're still buying MSC certified product at the end of the day. So where that retailer chooses not to need request the logo or need the logo on, they might not always see that price jump. But there's some research that we've done. There was a product in Sam's Club, which is kind of like Costco in the US, and they did a comparison of a product. I can't remember the exact product, and but basically they just did a comparison. They had the same product without the logo and the same product with the logo, and the logo one had a higher price. I can't remember the exact difference. I can get back to you with some of that research. But there was like a huge uptake of the one with the logo. But that depends of like the market too. Let's just say like maybe the US market or the Chinese market might not be as informed as, let's say, like the Europeans. In Europe, the MSC logo is very well recognized. So we actually we do the world's largest consumer study on seafood purchasing habits. It's called the GlobeScan study, and we track these metrics as well. So in Canada, we'll be looking at, and globally as well, we'll look at all these different kind of questions. I think in Canada we surveyed, like, it was like 3,000 people, and that are seafood consumers. So we're not going to survey people that don't eat seafood. So it's within that group. So we'll actually track over time. We can see that the uptake, and it's incremental, and there's some years where there's a big jump, and maybe because of like, okay, the COVID hits, maybe the sustainability of your seafood that you're buying is less important on the hierarchy of things you're looking at. So there's all these different things that we look at it. We look at it in a very holistic way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but just to give you a bit of the context of like why that might differ from one market to another, or for one product for another. But let's just say like there's some fisheries where that is the only product that is MSC certified. So the demand for that product will obviously be quite a bit higher for retailers like the Costco, Superstores, Sobeys, Walmarts. And then there's all the other retailers. So just because like a lot of our seafood, as you probably know, in Canada is exported, we actually consume about half the average amount of seafood that kind of globally, like it's usually like 2 servings per week, I think, globally, whereas we eat typically 1. And I really want to change that with the MSC as well. Like, I would love us to consume more Canadian seafood, especially with this whole tariff talk as well. It's never a better time to eat Canadian seafood. But to get to your second question, does that demand or that increased price ever impact the water? I would say no, because part of that is fisheries assessment looks at this, like the sustainability of the stock. So if you look at like the DFL management systems, they have like a total allowable catch, and each harvester has like quotas and whatnot. All the systems are a little bit different, but at the end of the day, if they go over that amount, sometimes there can be like charges. If they're going like way over, there's always a bit of a tolerance kind of up and down. But at the end of the day, if they're overfishing and they're like, whoa, we caught like double the amount of fish that we were supposed to, like that was like within our management plan, they're going to fail like really bad. So it's within their best interest to only catch a certain amount. And then there's some fisheries that actually like can't even get to a certain amount because they just don't have enough boats, or sometimes the stock is so low. So there's all these different factors going in. But at the end of the day, most harvesters, and I think harvesters, fishers kind of get a bad rap sometimes of like, oh, they just want to take and make their money and then whatever, they don't care. But at the end of the day, a lot of them are they're very smart people. They're scientists in their own way, almost like how a farmer knows the land, they know the ocean, and they understand. And then there are some of those actors that just want to make money. But at the end of the day, most of them want a career that is sustained, and a lot of them want to, it's obviously like a very cultural thing. They want their family to follow in their footsteps if they want to. So they want to make sure that fishery is there for their family to kind of like take over the business, or for a friend or whoever, someone in their community to take over the business eventually as well. So typically they want to keep things sustainable. They don't want to over harvest if they don't have to. So there's a lot of efforts to actually reduce the efforts using technology, management practices to lower the effort and to be more efficient in how they catch things so they can reach the quota. It's also a safety thing too. Like there's like off the coast of Newfoundland, it can be quite dangerous. So the less days on the water you can be to catch the same amount of seafood, the better. Because it's like, I mean, less work, but less danger, but more efficient, less carbon emissions. So it's all this, everything's kind of connected in that way. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking.
All right. Well, we are going to end. Oh, do you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
I got time. No worries.
Yeah, no, we're getting in there. We're probably gonna get kicked out of this room soon. So
problem.
thank you very much to Stefan and everyone else that joined in person and online. We're gonna be taking a break from presentations for a bit, but I think the next ones are gonna be some of the grad student presentations. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. And yeah, just before I go, I can share that kind of the last few slides of my presentation you carry if you want to. Like I said, there's that other capacity building training that's next week. Like I said, it's free. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to just give them my email and they can ask me as many questions as they want. Always happy to answer that. And if you ever want to learn more about the MSC career-wise, or about being like an auditor or anything like that, feel free to let me know and I'm happy to help you out with that.
Cool. Sounds good.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.